Hi there, and welcome to Menu Talk. I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor of Restaurant Business, and I'm here with
Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. Hi, everybody.
Hi there. We're actually broadcasting today from the National Restaurant Show in Chicago, which is fun. So if you hear a little background noise, it's people walking around and eating and drinking.
There's a lot of hubbub.
Definitely, yeah. Last night there was a lot of hubbub too. Why don't you start telling people about MenuMasters?
Yeah, it was our 28th annual, I believe, MenuMasters celebration honoring cool innovation at restaurants all over the country. We gave awards to Wendy's and Chili's and Iron Hill, and also Curtis Duffy, who was our Innovator of the Year, and Dominique Crenn, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It was it's good event. And we've been doing this thing for the past 2 years where we have the winning chefs come and collaborate at Johnson & Wales for basically a day, and they develop the menu that's served at the party. Before, for many years, we would make the winners serve their winning food, which meant we were like, congratulations, you won a big award. Now cook for 500 people, which is not that nice. And so we moved to from the Drake Hotel, where it was for many years, to Morgan Manufacturing, which is a larger space, because the event is successful enough that it outgrew the Drake. And also, it's become a cooler, hipper event because it's 2025. I mean, I used to have to wear a suit at MenuMasters, and last night I wore sneakers.
Yeah, it was much more casual. I've only been going for 2 years, and last year I think people got a little more dressed up, but this year a lot of people just came from the show and enjoyed themselves. And
yeah.
When
I wore dress shoes last year, which is annoying because there is a dance at the after party, and I like to cut a rug. And by the end of last year's party, I was quite tired and my feet hurt, which they're going to do anyway at the restaurant show.
True, but you need your feet to stay good anyway for the dancing part, for sure.
Yes, for dancing, absolutely. And I mean, it's always a great party. And the food was cool. It was all the stuff that they created at Johnson & Wales, and everybody can view the 5-part documentary that was produced about that collaboration. Don't worry, each episode is like 5-10 minutes, so it's not, a 5-part documentary sounds like it would be a nightmare that you have to watch.
It sounds like a Netflix series.
Right, but it's not. It's just a little entertaining series of shorts. But it was funny, it's been publicized fairly well by our marketing team. So I was just listening to some music on YouTube while I was working, and then suddenly I heard my voice on YouTube, and it was...
That must have been shocking.
Yes. I don't sing, but it was me in the documentary, obviously.
Right.
But so, Pat, this was your second year.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
No, I really enjoyed it, and I liked the fact that the Johnson & Wales students came to the event who had helped create some of the menu items that were served.
Yeah.
I tried a bunch of them. I know you were really busy as part of the emceeing duties, but...
I mean, I handed trophies out. It was not that hard.
But I tried the deconstructed beef Wellington, which was really good.
That was my favorite.
Yeah. I tried the superfood tamale, which was quite interesting and good.
Oh, yeah, I had that one too. That was good. Yeah.
And some of the little shrimp tostada. I can't remember what else, but I was really impressed that when the awardees accepted their trophies, they all thanked their teams. They all emphasized the fact that this is a team effort, and menu development is not something you do in a vacuum. You do it with your team, and that's how these items became so successful. So I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's certainly not a solo effort, any of this stuff.
No.
And they work hard and celebrate their teams. And I always find chain restaurant corporate chefs in particular to be really interesting, insightful people. especially like most of them have fine dining backgrounds or have worked in independent restaurants. So they are hardcore chefs who then decided that they want a 9-to-5 job, or they want to, instead of feeding 80 people a night, they're feeding hundreds of thousands of people a day. And, they can really move the needle in how humans interact with food and how they eat. Right. And it's a special career path. If anyone in the audience is wondering what their next step might be, take a look at the chains. I mean, everyone's hiring all the time. So.
And they're doing some really innovative things. I mean, Chili's cheese pull became a viral sensation, but it's actually really tasty. And I spoke to one of the chefs who was on the team, and he said that it took 2 years to actually perfect that.
Well, Well, and you could talk to them last night because their whole culinary team was at the MenuMasters party.
It was quite large.
Yes.
Quite a large team.
They brought a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And they won for the new Nashville Hot version of their Hot Moz, as it's called. That is such a viral sensation. I ate at the Chili's in Queens. So we talked about this. I ate there, I don't know, within the past year, and I was shooting social media video because everybody does, but it's also part of my job. And they saw what I was doing, and they actually set out the the payment kiosk, which is tilted just right so that you can put your phone on it and then you can record yourself do it. And they knew that I was going to do that, and
that's interesting.
They empowered me to do that, and I thought that was so smart.
Very,
And part of Chili's big success is the viral sensation of that mozzarella pull.
Definitely.
And
it's appeal for younger people now. I mean, it used to be something that baby boomers went to, and a chain that baby boomers frequented. But
I loved Chili's in high school. We would go to the one in Tamarack Square in Denver, and that was the first time I had fajitas. I mean, Chili's introduced fajitas to America, and it was a revelation. It was so good. And, it was sizzling and all that. And, people talk about the importance of experiential eating these days, but it's always been important.
That's true. And it's really interesting. We're at the restaurant show, and they also had an event the same night called Silver and Gold Plate event.
Yes.
And Kevin Hochman, who's the CEO and president of Chili's, won the gold plate. So Chili's really had their moment at the show. A few moments, actually.
Good. It was a great night for Chili's, and I'm even more impressed that George Felix, their CMO, came to MenuMasters.
That was definitely impressive. So have you tried anything at the show that you particularly liked? We've been eating, some food and sipping some drinks, although we haven't finished our tour of the floor. But is there anything so far that caught your eye?
Yeah, I have certainly a lot more floor to walk.
Me too.
There is some caviar in Lakeside if you like caviar, and I do. So I did a caviar bump. But I think the most interesting thing I had was pistachio coffee. It wasn't coffee with pistachio syrup. It was pistachios that had been roasted like coffee and then ground up and made into coffee.
Interesting.
Right, I'd never seen that before, so that was fun.
Yeah.
And then right near there, this was in the South Hall, there was mushroom coffee, which wasn't what I usually get when I have mushroom coffee, which is mushrooms that are, done, whatever's done to them, and then you drink it like coffee. This was coffee with chaga and lion's mane mushrooms ground into them.
Really? How did that taste?
Tasted like coffee.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose was the nutraceutical effects of the mushrooms, not the flavor. In fact, when they sell it ground, it's the mushrooms are ground into it. But when they sell them as beans, there's a specific point during the roasting process when it will absorb what's sprayed onto it. The beans will absorb what's sprayed on them, so then they spray the mushrooms on them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I've also noticed a lot of, we all have been talking about non-alcoholic drinks for a while now, but there are a lot of new products in the beverage pavilion, I think that's the beverage room is what it's called, where they are, really promoting low and no alcohol drinks. And it's definitely, something that you see on a lot more restaurant menus now, too.
And a ton of cannabis.
And a lot of cannabis.
Yeah. The laws have gotten weird, and they figured out Like in a lot of states, you can't use marijuana, but you can use hemp, and hemp has minuscule amounts of THC and the other psychoactive ingredients. So you have to use a lot of it and concentrate it, but the effect is similar. But the laws are just so weird that way.
Yeah, they definitely are. I haven't tried any of the hemp beverages yet, but
Oh,
I will.
I had some CBD stuff. I'm skeptical about the efficacy of CBD, but I wasn't going to drink THC stuff while walking the show floor.
No, I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah, and I'm not a sociable stoner. A little cannabis at bedtime is okay for me, and I'm in a cannabis legal state. Everybody, well, actually, both Illinois and New York are cannabis legal states.
Right.
But it's a nice little bedtime thing.
I really like the avocado toast bar they had at the Avocados from Mexico booth.
I walked by that, and I didn't have the toast or have anything there, but I have time to swing by.
It's definitely worth a nibble, for sure. And we have a lot more to explore, so
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that.
a ton. And I believe you interviewed somebody for this episode.
So I interviewed Kyle Knall, who is the chef owner of Birch in Milwaukee. And he actually started his career at Gramercy Tavern. He's worked for a lot of the big name chefs, but his wife is from Milwaukee, and he wanted to go back to Milwaukee and open a restaurant there. And it's a high, I mean, he's so well trained as a chef, so it's very high end food, but in a very casual setting, and it's right for Milwaukee because he gets people who come in and sit at the bar and have a burger, and he has other people who come in and have like tasting menus. So it really works for that city, and he's opening another place down in the warehouse district of Milwaukee, which he thinks will be another good addition to the city. So give a listen. I'm here with Chef Kyle Knall of Birch Restaurant in Milwaukee, and he is the chef owner of Birch along with his wife. So tell me, what is your wife's name, Kyle?
My wife's name is, her name's Megan. It's funny, since we opened the restaurant together, when someone writes something in the paper or magazine, they always say co-owner, and I wish they would just say I wish it was able to be like, oh, Megan and Kyle, the owners together, just because it feels like, it's our family that owns it, not one or the other.
Well, tell me about the culinary journey that brought you to Birch, and how did you end up in Milwaukee after growing up in Birmingham?
Sure. So kind of back to the beginning, growing up in Birmingham, my older brother, by about 13 years, was a chef for most of my childhood. When I was in high school, I started to kind of mess around cooking at a neighborhood restaurant. And when I actually fell in love with it, my brother told me, if you want to take this serious, why don't you come work with us? And I started working at a restaurant called Daniel George for him. And he was the sous chef. Two owners were both chefs, and it was a white tablecloth restaurant. Everything was bought local. It was a great place, dinner 5 nights a week. And so I get off school at 3:00, head over to the restaurant and work the Gramercy station. I did that for my last 2 years of high school. And when it came time to think about going to college, I took one college day and went to the local culinary school and enrolled and got accepted and started school, I think 2 months after I got out of high school. And in the meantime, I started working for my mentor, Frank Stitt, at Chez Fonfon and Highlands Bar and Grill.
Right. Well, he's really well known all around the country.
Right.
And kind of put Birmingham on the map as far as restaurant city.
For sure. And when I talk about Birmingham, food always comes up as what I think is the most important thing. And when you talk about food and chefs, you think about just restaurants. But I think what Frank did for Birmingham in general, really changed the way people look at the city and even the state of Alabama. I look at him more as almost like a political figure, almost as someone who really changed so much of the city itself. So I worked for Frank for about 4 years, became a sous chef at a young age, and met my wife. She worked at Bottega. I worked at Chez Fonfon, and she told me she was going to move to New York City. And I said, great, can I go with you? And she said, oh, sure. And we took one visit to visit her sister. And 4 months later, we moved. I trailed at Gramercy Tavern, actually like 4 days after moving to New York. And I always tell people about this story. Mike Anthony wasn't at the restaurant this night. And 2 days after my trail, I was at Trader Joe's with Megan. And I said, oh, it looks like Gramercy's calling my phone. Let me go outside. And I went outside and answered it. And I went back inside and I said to Megan, I don't know who this was. This guy was like, Frank Stitt is one of the nicest chefs ever. This guy on the phone was just like so nice and overwhelming with like being so genuine. But he offered me the job and I started Gramercy next week. So
Wow,
I
that's
started at,
amazing. Yeah.
at Gramercy like my second week of moving to New York, and ended up working there for about almost 5 years.
And I mean, I find, I grew up in New York, so I don't find New York as scary as people. I can't imagine coming from another city and never having been in New York and just putting down roots here. It just takes such a long time to get to know it.
It's funny, like I've done like that change and now the change of moving to Milwaukee. Being involved in a busy restaurant really acts as like a crutch almost to adapting yourself to the city. So like I always tell people, being a line cook, I would go to work at 11:30 in the morning, leave at like midnight, and just being on the subway at those times, it was pretty chill. And like, leaving the restaurant at night, nobody on the streets, and it was a great way to kind of adjust to the city, and then obviously on my weekend like get to do some fun things. But being in the busy restaurant really acted as like a crutch to adjust for sure.
So, what were some of the best lessons you learned at Gramercy and working for Frank Stitt and others?
When I talk about first, like if I talk to somebody about Mike and talk about all of his qualities as a chef, as a leader, as a mentor, and then I bring up I work for Frank, it's almost comical sometimes because they share so many great qualities, and they're very similar in ways of how they cook, how they support the community, how they act as leaders. Obviously, like after working for USHG for so long, we talk about hospitality a lot in the restaurant,
Mm.
to the point now where we talk about how I think good food should just be a part of what we do. And it's just like that's a given. So let's focus on what actually makes the restaurant special, and to us that's hospitality. And I think Frank and Mike both had that mindset. That doesn't mean like you don't focus on food, because it is definitely important, but they both knew that the front of the house is just as important, if not more important, to give a great experience. And so for me, it was always, those are my two mentors. Those are really the only two chefs I worked for. And it really helped me. It's kind of the only way that I was taught was how important the hospitality is in the front of the house. Yeah. So like those were the biggest things from those two.
So, is your wife Megan the front of the house person?
So yeah, so we left New York, and during COVID, our son was born at NYU, February 2020. I had just opened a restaurant with Steven Starr, Electric Lemon, at the Equinox Hotel.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And obviously we shut that down. And when it came time to reopen, we thought, is this the place where we want to have a family right now? We can always come back. We can always do whatever we want to do. And we decided to make the move here. And we actually had our daughter 2 years after moving here. So when we first moved here, Megan played a role in the front of the house, but then quickly kind of stepped away to take care of our daughter, and obviously to be a great mom. And so,
Of course,
really,
yeah.
yeah. So we find so much pride in, I think, having a great family and figuring out how to do restaurants and the family all together.
Well, so tell me a little bit about how Birch is turning Milwaukee into a serious dining destination. I know you're not the only restaurant there that's doing that, but how do you see your mission and vision in Milwaukee?
Sure. So it all kind of goes back to, I remember standing in a stairwell in the Equinox Hotel and calling my father-in-law who lives here and saying to him, I think over the next few years, we might want to start thinking about moving to Milwaukee so we can be part of a community where I'm not just the chef of a restaurant. It's obviously amazing to work in New York, but we wanted to do something more impactful, and just, we wanted to spread our wings and do different do different things. And so, we really use Birch as an opportunity and a tool to really impact the community. I
Mm.
was talking to a guest last night about how, it was Tuesday and they're like, oh, for Milwaukee, Tuesday night, this is a very busy restaurant. Congratulations. And it just led to the conversation of it being an amazing way to the restaurant to use it as a tool to support charities, to do fundraisers here, and to make sure people know that that's just as important as having this busy restaurant. Um, and obviously, we're lucky to have a busy place that we can do these different things. But they've really fell in line together for us. Um, Birch is a larger size restaurant for Milwaukee.
How many seats are there?
It's about 115, 120, including our bar. And I think when I moved here, a few different chefs said, that I had just met there, that's a big restaurant. You sure you want to do that? And for us, I was like 100%, like to me, what makes a great restaurant is the space, the energy, the people. And so to have this restaurant that's busy and fun really makes the experience, I think, unique and special in Milwaukee. And I'm not saying other restaurants aren't busy. It's just, I think, we turn the music up a little louder, and it's just really about the experience, and all those things kind of flush together to make it work.
Well, what is the menu like? I mean, it sounds like you're trying to put forward a more like casual ambiance, or I mean, but it's definitely a fine dining menu because
Right.
of your training.
Sure. What's been the coolest thing as a chef and someone who's obviously cooking the food and being around the food through all the years, working in Birmingham, opening a restaurant in New York. We actually opened a second restaurant in New Orleans in like 2017. And, and tying it back to Mike Anthony, Mike always talked about cooking American food and trying to create the identity of what American food is. Because I think for the longest time, nicer restaurants where, people would think about French food. Mike really kind of drilled it into to us that why not create, when people talk about let's go around the corner to a cafe and have a bite to eat, he always said, well, that's what a tavern is in the American version, like let's go around the corner to a tavern and have something delicious. And so cooking in New Orleans, cooking in New York, and now Milwaukee, it's funny how the idea of how we cook is very similar of how we kind of always did it. And the ingredients at some point are pretty similar as well. Obviously, some things are different, but for us, it's really using what's available in our community and supporting the people that we see at the market and that we interact with on a daily basis, and letting that define how we cook. And so, like, yeah, Birch is, if you look at like the price point and I think quality of hospitality and the quality of thoughtfulness that goes into everything, it is on the scale of what you would say like fine dining is. But yeah, we present it in a fun atmosphere. And it still is a place that people come for celebrations and anniversaries and all of those great things.
Hmm.
But what's great is that it has become a place that we see people sometimes twice a week because we diversify the ways that you can eat here, which I found to be really interesting to work with and almost manipulate. And it kind of has shown us that our guests have really started to trust what we're doing, and they'll come, like I said, twice in 1 week to have different kind of experiences.
Hmm. So, what are some of your favorite dishes that you created for the menu?
So the most unique thing about Birch is there's no gas here. We just
Oh,
have a
really?
big wood burning hearth, which to us, when we talk about it, it gives us guidelines of how we cook, and
Hmm.
also to me makes us, we always focus on buying the best produce that we can because it's cooked so simply over the fire. So everything's cooked at some point over the fire. But my favorite dish, which is, it's a funny thing to talk about, we call it a Contramar inspired fish, and so it's based on Contramar in Mexico City. It's the fish dish that they made famous, where they rub half a black bass with one paste and half with the other, and they cook it in a fire and serve it fresh tortillas. And so we actually do that here, but we use everything from from this area. So we make tortillas. We use this trout that's farm raised at a really amazing place in the state. And the garnishes and the sauces that we serve change throughout the year, probably 2 dozen times. And it's a fun way to, I think, sit in our restaurant and eat. So, like, if you're sitting with somebody, you're building these tacos and you eat that as your entree, it's really fun. And there's always a ton of herbs and acidity in the dish. And it presents itself in a really fun way. But at the same time, it's very thoughtful and well put together, I think, from the conception all the way through.
And Stonebank Farm is connected with your restaurant as well. Can you explain that connection?
Sure. So when we moved here in August of 2020, I think the day after we moved, my mother-in-law said, "Hey, I want to take you to this place." And it was to Stonebank. During the pandemic, Stonebank, which is this little market that's surrounded by a small farm, they sell meats that they raise, they sell produce that they grow, but they also sell a bunch of other produce from neighboring farms. They were making meals to go for people to come by. And so we went my mother-in-law took me to Stonebank, and I just walked away feeling like this place is so special. It felt like a small Stone Barns, and I just thought, there's something has to happen with us and here. So the next week I went back and I said, let me come in for a few times and make some meals to sell. They were making things that didn't really have an identity. It was kind of all over the place. I said, let me create this identity of what the food should be here. And I ended up working there full time for almost a year, and then stayed on part time as a consultant for actually still up until this point. And so having that connection with Stonebank of learning about the produce, being surrounded by all this amazing stuff from all these farms, really helped guide me in thinking about food after moving here. But still to this day, like, we raise 26 lamb every year there that they get taken to slaughter, that we serve at Birch, which is really special. And we use a bunch of that grass-fed beef to experiment with, to figure out different ways to cook it, to explain to people who buy it in their market. So we've used it as a tool to learn and grow as chefs ourselves, but also to teach people in the community how to cook these things like grass-fed beef, and how to cook delicious produce.
So do you source a lot from Stonebank Farm then?
Throughout the year, it's a smaller percentage compared to like 4 or 5 other farmers that we use. We have this farmers market called the West Dallas Farmers Market that is, I always say, it can hang with the Union Square Market in terms of like how much amazing produce comes to it. So we actually buy, like, I would say 95% of our produce from that market.
Cool.
Which is it's so special, and the farmers from there come have dinner here. Everything from our eggs and our pasta, to really everything we use comes from that market.
That's so cool. I mean, I haven't been to that market, but in Madison, they have a fabulous farmers market every weekend, and I've been to that, and I was just really impressed by all the produce and flowers.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, I always tell people, like, when they ask me how I like living in Wisconsin and how the move has been, I compare it to if we travel somewhere where produce doesn't grow that well. I say, I actually fell into like one of the best cases scenario for how I love to eat and cook, because the agriculture is so amazing here, from the produce to the dairy and so forth.
Do you try and put any like Midwestern influences in the menu? I mean, I don't know exactly what Midwest food is, but
Sure. I think we definitely do by what we use. Like, a fish that we cook pretty regularly is called walleye, so it's a lake fish. So we use that instead of using like wild striped bass or something off the East Coast. And so in thoughts of Midwest, we do it like that. But people really look at Birch as this fresh take on eating in Milwaukee, for sure. But, for me, it's like everything comes from the community. And so it's as Midwest as it can get. It's just a different interpretation of it.
So have you noticed guests' expectations changing at all, with the economy being so rocky right now? And are you doing anything to like adapt to that?
It's a obviously a hard thing to think about.
Mm.
I have friends on the West Coast who I talk to that have really experienced a lot of issues lately of decrease in guest covers, and we've actually like hit this sweet spot where like our weeks are continuing to be better than last year's.
Mm. Oh, that's great.
So I don't I I don't I hate to talk about it because it sounds like I don't want to jinx it in ways,
Right.
but I feel like we fall in this kind of level of we're not white tablecloth and very fine dining, but we are of that quality, and so I think we're able to hit on so many different levels. And I mentioned earlier we'll see guests in twice in 1 week.
Hmm.
Our bar is separated from the restaurant, and we serve a burger in there, and so we'll see guests come in for the burger, and then we'll see them come in for just dinner in the restaurant. We do an oyster pop up at our big chef counter. So we've created these opportunities, I think, to really keep the ball rolling. And like tomorrow night, we're doing a pop up. We do it once a month for our new restaurant where we open Birch as Cassis. And so for a Thursday in April, we'll end up having like the highest sales of the week on a Thursday. So doing all these little things, I think, just keeps it rolling for us.
Hmm. Sounds really smart. So, what's coming up this summer? What's next for you and Birch? And
So we're opening a new restaurant in the fall called Cassis. It's going to be a restaurant about this size, a little bigger, really inspired by French brasseries. It's in a really amazing part of Milwaukee where the public market is, where
mm,
there is the most foot traffic, I think, actually in the state of Wisconsin, is in this area. And when we moved here, people that knew Milwaukee had always asked, "Are y'all opening a restaurant in the third ward?" And we're like, "Oh, we actually found this restaurant Birch that we're doing, but maybe one day." And so we thought, we should open a bistro in the third ward. We think that's a restaurant that can be approachable all day to all types of people. Hopefully, can be busy and fun. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing. We've been building it for about a year. It'll open in the fall. It'll be open all day. It's on the river actually, so it's going to be really pretty. And the goal is so it's actually was an issue with the design for a while. Was the design was kept on becoming a little too fancy in my opinion, and I kept on having to pull it back. And it's like we really want this to be approachable for everybody all the time. And so that opens in the fall. We're really really excited about that, but at the same time, to me that means Birch has to have like the best year ever. Like to me, so much focus has to go into this restaurant, and obviously for reasons of making sure the business runs well when I step away at times to work on the new restaurant, but more importantly, so that when guests come in the restaurant, they feel like it's a better restaurant than it's ever been. And to me, that's about the hospitality, and making sure that people feel more genuine than ever when they come into the restaurant. So that's kind of where my focus is now, almost more than planning a new restaurant is hoping to make sure that this restaurant has like a really incredible year.
thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Menu Talk. Like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Pat Cobe.
And I'm Bret Thorn.
See you next week.